Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome to today's video. So today we're going to be going over my fusion plan for getting the latest Fragment summon champion in the game, Noldua The Gloaming, I believe is her name, which I didn't know to gloam was a word, as opposed to gleam. But nonetheless, we're going to be talking about her by herself, not talking about her with her partner, of course, Solinar the Gleaming. So with that, let's dive into her kit and talk about how I would personally rate this champion in a vacuum. So Noldua here, Force Affinity, Legendary Support, of course, and she is definitely a support. So I kind of think of her as a kind of their new age reviver type that they're going for, kind of like a Venalicia, I believe her name is, from the Nice Revenant. But it's a reviver, or she is a reviver, but she's not necessarily like your traditional Elva Autumnborn Pythion type of reviver with the cleanse and the healing and the block debuffs and all that stuff. She's more of a utility champion who also has a revive in her kit. So again, we're going to be talking about her in a vacuum as far as her, or insofar as her by herself, but you can read and understand the parts of where the partner comes in at your own wish. So on the A1 here, it has a 75% chance of placing Enfeeble for 2 turns, which is pretty nice. This is good for like a counterattack type stuff. But if the target is a boss instead of the Enfeeble, because of course you can't enfeeble bosses, this will be a weaken for 2 turns, which is nice, especially when it synergizes with her A3, which is a full buff strip, and it is an AoE decrease defense, 100% chance of placing or doing both of those things in a 3-turn cooldown when booked. So albeit not on the same ability, as long as no one has to be revived on the A3, she is a decreased defense and a weakened champion on top of the buff strip when it comes to boss encounters, but she is just a buff strip, decreased defense, and then an enfeeble champion when it comes to any other type of wave content or PvP. Then lastly, we do have the revive ability here, which is a full team revive, 50% HP, 50% turn meter, and then it places a shield equal to 30% of her max HP on everyone after the revive. So there's a little bit of sustain. This is on a 4-turn cooldown. So 4-turn cooldown, AoE revive. And again, no way to heal herself or your team in her kit. So you're going to do something to keep her alive wherever you are running her. And then on the passive here, a lot of this is just the partner synergy, but the main part here is that all turn meter fill effects used by enemies are 30% less effective. So they're just less powerful when she's on the team, which is okay, I guess. It doesn't stop them from turn meter filling. It just means they're not going to get as much out of it. So make of that what you will. So when you combine all of these 3 abilities together with the passive and the base stats, you can see here a pretty healthy amount of HP for support. So she can build or have a pretty substantial shield here on the revive. Good amount of defense for a support, decent amount of speed at 108, and then a little bit of extra accuracy. Every champion in the game, if you don't know, I think like Epic Plus has 30 base resistance, so there's nothing special there. Accuracy on the aura. But yeah, I think she's like a B minus champion. She can definitely work. I think she's probably better in like some sort of manual situation. So niche content, Curse City, Doom Tower, Faction Wars, hard mode. She's definitely an upgrade, I would say, to the revivers in the faction. So, thinking for those of you who don't have Blind Seer, which probably most of you don't, she's the Void Legendary after all, you're kind of rocking with the Kaiden with a 2 ally revive and increased defense on a 4-turn cooldown, or you're rocking with Rianne the Conjurer, you get, of course, from Doom Tower, just a single target revive on a 4-turn cooldown. So if those are your only 2 revivers in the faction, I guess Fang Cleric as well, but he's kind of trash. So if those are your only revivers on your team or on your roster, then Noldua is actually going to be a pretty substantial step up in terms of AoE revive capability. And then also she's your debuffer, which is kind of great. So if a lot of people like myself, obviously, Lydia's in the faction, so she's objectively better, Void Affinity and whatnot. But, it's a step up from like a Madame Serris, for example, if you're still kind of in that progression phase. There is a fair amount of redundancy in this faction as far as buff strip debuffers. I already mentioned Rianne and Madame Serris, so they're on Madame Serris on a 4-turn cooldown. This is on a 3-turn cooldown when booked, but it is just the weaken. However, you could run them together, of course. But yeah, I don't know. I think she's okay. Like I said, B doesn't mean bad, right? It just means that she's not, she's not S tier. She's not going to carry your account necessarily, but she will be helpful and useful. You could probably put her in Regen Immortal, and that might be able to keep her alive so that she can keep everyone else alive. The shield might be big enough of when she uses the revive on other people who are squishier and die that she won't take as much damage. You can probably put some relics on her, like the golden elixir or whatever, to kind of promote her healing and whatnot. So I think you can make her work in a lot of PvE situation. So I'm definitely going to be going for her myself, but that's kind of my default. I go for every single fusion, so that's not much of a declaration onto the quality of said champion. So then if your goal is to go for this champion, and from the polls I've seen, it's kind of like a 50-50 split. Some want her and some don't. Then let's talk about my fusion plan, which will be linked in the description box down below if you'd like a copy or a link to this spreadsheet here. You can follow along live as I update things as need be. But the main thing to point out here for this particular fragment summon is that it's pretty standard for the most part, but we'll get to the caveats that are a little bit different and unique. But we do have the 4 dungeon split. We don't have an event dungeon tournament. We have 2 classic arena tournaments. We have a champion training tournament, champion chase tournament, which I suspect is going to be 2x sacreds. I think that's where we are in the rotation after ancients being the most recent one. We have 1 gear hunters event, put a pin in that, 3 gear enhancement events, 1 champion training event, no summon rush, and then a superheroes path. So before we dive into those 2 special things, let me point out here that the overall amount of fragments you can gain here is 110 from the most accessible sources. There are technically a maximum of 130 if you can win the champion chase or champion training tournaments, but that is 1 in 100, 1 in 50 or whatever, and so that's highly unlikely that you're going to be the winner of your group. But so I wouldn't count on that. So I like to think of it as 110 fragments up for grabs, which is good and bad depending upon how you want to look at it. So as I mentioned earlier, there's only 1 dedicated gear hunters event, which is nice because you can focus on this one right at the beginning of the fusion, and that's the only one you really have to hardcore grind for, and for the sake of the fusion, compared to having 3 different instances of wherever they might fall with the other elements of the fusion. But you have to make up for it, or you could have to make up for it depending upon how you want to play it in the hero's path here. This notably is worth 20 or has 25 fragments up for grabs in total, meaning that if you think of this as a normal summon rush would have 15 fragments. Then the 2 gear hunters events that we're missing would be the 5 and the 5, so 10. So it is a combination of gear hunters and a summon rush. But I do think this is a great opportunity to just target 15 fragments in total, because that is all you really need. You do some dungeons over the course of these few days to offset the cost of however many shards you'd have to pull, and then you can kind of get the best of both worlds, where you do some dungeon divers, but it gives you credit towards reducing the amount of overall shards you need to get, on top of you already targeting the lower of the milestones, that being 15, because that's all you really need, assuming you do everything else. However, you could flip it around and say, I'd rather just pull all of my shards during the hero's path, skip the champion chase, so you skip these 10, and then you just focus solely on the progressive chance event, presumably the progressive chance event going on here, and then you focus on the hero's path and you get all 25 of those. So you can kind of pick and choose how you want to approach it. Overall, I think it kind of averages out to around the same amount of shards, but there could be some logic that we don't know the exact cost yet, but there could be some foundation for the hero's path being cheaper overall. It just depends where things are, and depends how much grinding in dungeons and whatnot you do during this time frame. But yeah, everything else is pretty darn par for the course. For anyone who's not familiar with this particular spreadsheet, over here on the right hand side we do have the milestones for every event and tournament. Anything marked with an asterisk means that it is an estimated value based off historical precedent, and then anything that is just filled in, like for example the first Ice Golem tournament, is the reflecting value once it is live in the game. We know fully what the number is. The other thing I like to point out here is that at the very bottom you can see that I've outlined my personal energy plan. This is not a guideline for you guys how you want to spend your energy, but this is just how I'm going to be spending my energy for each given day of the fusion, although it is subject to change based on how much I get done on any particular day. And so yeah, one thing to highlight here is that we do have the standard amount of pinch points here, which is just an overlap of champion training and some other dungeons. So the first champion training tournament overlaps entirely with the spider tournament, and then the later champion training event, which notably is only 3 days long instead of the standard 4-day, or typical I should say 4-day, is going to overlap with the dragon and the Fire Knight tournaments. Popping back in the game, let's talk about some of the current events going on right now, starting off with my current supply count here at the start of the fusion. So you can see we're, let's call it, at 5,000 gems, and we're at 300 and I think it was 361 million silver when I started this morning. Of course, I've run some Ice Golem. As we saw, that's the first tournament, so that I've already gained a decent amount of silver from just running that from the energy from yesterday's reset. But for those who don't know, I take a snapshot of my supply count at the beginning of every fusion and compare it to where I end off in terms of silver and gems, just to catalog how much of my resources I spend over the course of a fusion, to document that for you guys, just so you know the costs, the rough costs for an endgame free-to-play player. You can check out that summary once the fusion ends in a couple of weeks here on my community tab page if you'd like to see the details of that report out. In terms of the events and tournaments, as I already mentioned, the Ice Golem tournament is in full swing, and that is the only part that matters and for the sake of tournaments right now. 2250 is a pretty standard milestone. It's been that way for years. We can claim a little bit here, but yeah, you can see here I'm already at 800 points again. That was primarily just using the energy from last night's reset. I didn't do anything last night, waited until today once the fusion began, and then started to run and burn all the energy that we got for free from the dailies. And then for the events, thankfully we get to start it off with one of the Gear Hunters events, so we get to do that overlapping with the entirety of Ice Golem. Notably though, 2250 in the Ice Golem tournament is not enough to get you to 3700, so you're probably going to have to use some extra energy and or gems in order to get all the way out there above and beyond what is required for the tournament itself. But that could be good, because at least for me, in my case, that means I get to run the event dungeon a little bit, so I get more, try to get more chronophage gear, which I desperately need artifacts for. Anyways, gear enhancement starts tomorrow, so I'll be working on that, which is also nice because CVC starts tomorrow, and this is a PR CVC, personal rewards CVC, so we get to take advantage of majority of the rest of farming Ice Golem for today / tomorrow in terms of the game reset, and then we also get to do some forging for the sake of CVC, so lots of good things that will benefit the try to help my clan win the personal rewards CVC. So yeah, that's gonna do it for my fusion plan for getting Noldua the Gloaming. And I guess if you've stayed this far, we can talk a little bit about the the tandem going on here. February is the typical couples month, of course, Valentine's Day, so every year is when they usually release some sort of coupling of champions, like Narcisse and Cora, for example. And in terms of running them together, I think that she benefits from him being around, but you don't really need her per se to make him powerful. I think his kit is powerful on his own. It just gets a little bit better, or I guess slightly better. Like, you don't need crit rate when she's around, but in most settings, they're from different factions, so you can't take advantage of that in faction wars. And then thinking of live arena, you could just ban one of them, and then you would break the build on him. He wouldn't be able to crit, or he just wouldn't be full crit rate. So in most cases, you're going to want to run, you can run them together, but you're going to want to run him with full crit rate, so her benefiting him is kind of minimal, aside from the passive where like you take damage instead of healing, which is really, really cool, I must admit. But anyways, yeah, in terms of him benefiting her, he just makes everything she does not irresistible, and then increase attack on top of the buff strip here, which is kind of useful. It powers him up. He is attack based after all. And it's okay, I guess. He gets 100% Termina when he's revived, if he's revived by the skill. So, I don't think that it's important to get her for the sake of having the tandem, but that is an argument that could be made depending upon how you feel about her. Narcisse, we didn't expect him to be guaranteed when Ancora came out, and objectively speaking, Ancora on her own is a little bit better. Just her passive is really, really strong in terms of, absorbing CC and whatnot. And in this case, I think on her own, she's more of a PvE champion. And then if you run them together, you probably have to stick her in, I've seen 9-piece Mercurial builds, which is kind of unrealistic, I think, for majority of players. But maybe like 2-turn Stone Skin, kind of like how a lot of people build their Ancoras, who also doesn't have any way to heal herself. A similar problem in that regard. That's probably what you'd have to do. Put her in 2-piece or 2-turn Stone Skin, and then do what you can in the meantime. And yeah, I don't know, I'm rambling at this point, but I think she's okay. I think she's a B tier champion. I don't think you need to get her for the sake of having half of the tandem, because the other half of the tandem is of course a void legendary. But at the same time, given the potential historical precedence of Ancora and Narcisse, there could be a guaranteed event, and that one's just purely from shards, 110 way back when, I think it's 2024. And so there is a chance that Solinar could be potentially accessible, and you might feel bad if you miss out on getting the tandem because one of them was offered up for free, air quotes, in a Fragment Summon event. So again, that could sway your decision. For me, it doesn't really matter. I do have Refusion, and then if they offer a chance to get this guy, then I'll definitely go for it because I have an abundance of resources and I can definitely pull it out. But yeah, let me know in the comment section down below, what do you think of this champion Noldua on her own? What do you think of the tandem? Are they the new most broken champions in the game? Some people always like to jump to that conclusion, but I don't think they're that broken. I think they're powerful, but not broken. But it kind of depends as people, play test and learn what to do, what not to do against him and whatnot. I think they're going to find their place in the meta, if at all. If you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. It really does help out the channel. And feel free to hit the subscribe button down below as well, if and only if you're enjoying the content overall on the channel for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching and have a good one.